Okay, so cast your mind back to when I first showed you this eye with the Play-Doh on it. The whole point of that is to show you how the eye is an actual sphere, but the skin of the upper eyelid and the lower lid actually project out a little bit, and they cast a shadow on the white of the eye. That's evident in the top lid. You can see that there's a shadow, a little one, cast onto the white of the eye and onto the iris. The pink part in the corner of the eye is called the caruncle. So that's a term that I'll use throughout this painting process of doing the eye. All right, so here is what I did. I drew it out, but I'm just showing you how I measured to get the exact height and width of the reference that I was looking at. So you're going to make your painting the exact same measurements as the picture. This is actually kind of a shortcut way of drawing quickly, and it's helpful. I like to make sure that my references are a good size. If I'm drawing like a face, I want it to be close to life size. That way I'm not having to squint or really zoom in on a very tiny image. I'm looking at something that is exactly true to the size or close to it. So you can see that measuring technique that we talked about at the beginning of the year is being used here. All right, so just like with the eyeball, I'm going directly to the pupil first. And remember, you're making your own black, so you can take the dark brown and blue or red. You can make black a number of ways. That's just what I did. And I'm starting out with the shadow that's cast on top of the iris. So remember how the lid projects, so there's a shadow there. And then I'm going to get that ring around the eye that we talked about last class, and it should be evident in your eyeball as well. The thing is, when you're first laying down paint, it can look transparent, and that's what's happening here. That's why I really recommend you guys and require you to put on multiple layers. So you want to use your skinny brush for this. And I'm kind of doing an outline on that top lid because that lid's going to have eyelashes, so it's almost like you want to put eyeliner on that top lid. Now when it comes to the bottom lid, it's important that you see a little bit of that skin flap. So it's kind of like it is multi-sided too. There's a front side and then there's that inside. It kind of looks a little bit pink or peach when you look at it. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, look at your own eye in the mirror. So there is a little bit of like tissue to the right of the eye, so to the left. In this eye, there's the caruncle, that pink thing, but there's also a little bit of a pink, darker area to the right there. It's like the muscle tissue that's holding your eyeball in place. And I'm kind of outlining some of my marks that I did with pencil to separate it. The caruncle has an interesting shape to it. Here's what it looks like side by side with my reference pictures so far. Now I'm going to go into the skin tones. I'm going to show you how I mix my skin tone. So I start out with the burnt sienna. It's a warmer brown that we have on our palette. It's a shortcut method. You could just take yellow, red, and blue, but I'm using burnt sienna to start out with. I'm kind of making a sort of peach color, and then I'm going to add the primaries to it. You could, instead of using pure lemon yellow, you could add yellow ochre. So if you look at my palette, I actually don't have that many colors on there. I have two yellows, kind of a lemon yellow, yellow ochre, cad red, alizarin crimson, and then I have the browns. So I have the burnt sienna, and I have burnt umber, and one blue, and I think it's ultra blue that I have. So I can make my skin tone from that. I think one of the most important things with skin tone is realizing that there are cool colors in skin tone. It's not orange. You have variety. So in places you'll have purple in skin tone. You might have blue or green. Not just where the veins are, but where the skin moves into shadow. And you need to make a variety of different hues. So you're not just doing one value or one temperature, you have a whole bunch. So I start off with a few main piles. I also have a drop of the slow dry stuff that I have separate from my palette, but I put a little bit into my whites to help slow that process down. And here you can see I'm actually going towards the shadow areas first. That's what I'm targeting. Most individuals have a crease above their upper lid, and I know I do. Not everyone does, but check your model that you're looking at and see if they do, because you'll need to put that in with a brown. Just tell yourself that when you're putting down that crease, that it shouldn't be all one color. I intentionally followed the light pattern, and I'm making mine darker on the sides, but lighter and warmer on the top to help give that some volume. If you do it all one color, it's going to look very flat like a child's drawing. So it's not just one hue there, it's dark, light, dark. So I always try and find the shadow areas first. I noticed that the lid is kind of in shadow, so I mixed some purple in with brown and added a little bit of white to that to get that lid color. Now that lid does rapidly move into light. In fact, there's a really bright highlight on this particular lid, on the upper lid, and it's to the left. So you have to pay attention to that. You want to try and see gradients everywhere. So you want to, particularly on the face, you want to see a gradient on that top lid. Below the eye, there's kind of a pocket or a pouch that would have a gradient too. The eye socket itself is somewhat of a gradient. So I worked with the small brush at first for the creases and stuff like that, but then it's important that you switch up to the bigger brush because it'll actually help to blend things in, and you do want it to blend. You don't want it to be patchy skin, so that's going to be important as well. You'll notice to the right of the eye, at the corner of the eye there, there's kind of a shadowy pocket, and it's creating this interesting pattern almost like a Cleopatra Egyptian eye. And it's just how the light is hitting that form. So you always have to think of the eye in terms of 3D. It's a form that we're seeing here. It's not flat. The eye is sticking out. It's a sphere. There's the skin that's wrapping on top. That's kind of sticking out. There's the eyelashes that also block the lights. And then this eye is recessed, right? It's recessed inside of a eye socket. So that socket is kind of like a valley. So that's why we get these interesting patterns within the eye. I find them fascinating. And it's important to pay attention to the shape the shadows make. What's also super important is how you curve your stroke. Like I'm curving that stroke along that eye socket ridge, kind of up towards the brow line, making sure that my brush strokes are short and they're really wrapping around that form. So you'll see me do that I'm very deliberate with how I curve my brush or angle it. Sometimes I use the skinny side, sometimes I'll kind of angle it to the flat side of the brush, so it can depend. If you want to transition or get a gradient like I will eventually need to do, shorter strokes are what you'd use. There's that pocket or pouch below the eye. On some people it's more pronounced. You just have to look at your particular reference in order to see that. And this is the first layer, so be forgiving of yourself, and it's okay to make mistakes on layer 1. I'm going to show you what mine looks like with layer 2, but I'm probably going to put a third layer on and definitely going to be putting in eyelashes. But for now, like you're seeing here, focusing on the darker areas within the eye and the skin of the eye, and then later I'll go to the midtones and the highlights. So again, here it's like you want to think about that cheekbone, about the paintbrush curve wrapping around that cheekbone to suggest kind of a sphere shape. Now I'm going in with some of the lights. That's kind of fun too. You know, the tone that we picked, that brown and white, works as a really good underpainting. Now you can always go darker or lighter with the skin tone. Some skin tone is pinker or some is even a little bluer. So you're going to have to look at your individual person that you're viewing in order to try and replicate that to the best of your ability. There are certain areas of faces that do have a little bit more pink in them, so that's important to be aware of. We're going to talk more about that at a later class. We are going to get in the eyebrow. It's important that you understand that the eyebrow is actually extends beyond the eye, both in front and at the back. Eyebrows have a particular shape to them. They have a peak, and it's not in the center. It's actually slightly to the right, closer to the ear where that peak takes place. Right now, I'm blocking in the eyebrow. That means that it's kind of like a rough suggestion of the eyebrow, but not how it's going to be ultimately. The fun part is putting in the white of the eye. Do you notice how on the right side, the white of the eye actually has a different color? It's more like gray, a little bit of pink in there. It's important that you compare the left side to the right side. I also really look at the shape the white of the eye is making when I'm doing my drawings of eyes, because that can give you a lot of information. So don't assume that the white of the eye is white. Remember back to how you painted the eyeball. You have to paint it as though it were a sphere. You have to curve your stroke to wrap around the eyeball itself. And of course, remember that you're getting in that little shadow that's at the top part that's cast by the upper lid onto the white of the eyeball. Okay, so I skipped ahead. This is with layer 2. Now it's still not quite done. You can see some of my transitions are a little bit too sharp edged. I need to smooth that out. There's also no lashes yet, but there will be some. But here it is side by side, so you can see, it's not a bad idea to also use like a piece of scrap paper to try and color match on. I did that in places when I was a little bit confused about the color or unsure if I got the value right. And then lastly, the finishing stage is to put texture on this. So going back in and doing the eyelashes, doing the hairs that are on the eyebrow, maybe refining the caruncle and making it look even more glossy, looking for all those little gradients that are within the eye.